Roberto De Zerbi has been described as one of the most influential managers of the last 20 years. Not my words, the words of Pep Guardiola, the king of the managers. Rawr. But why? What does he actually do? We know he's quite good because, since he's been in charge of Brighton, only Man City have averaged more possession in the Premier League. In that same time, Brighton have also scored the third most goals of any team, recorded the second highest expected goals. This season they're in European competition for the first time, and they're 4 points off the top of the Premier League table, and that is after selling their goalkeeper and two of their key players for a combined £195 million-ish. But how? How is he doing it? What does he do? And there's another thing to consider too, because De Zerbi has only won 2 trophies in his career so far. And one of them is the Coppa Italia Serie C, which, as we all know, is a straight knockout-based competition involving teams from Serie C in Italian football, first held in 1972. The other one is the Ukrainian Super Cup with Shakhtar, which is just the same as the Community Shield, but in Ukraine. Now sure, Brighton are doing all very well and all that, but by the same age, 44 years old, Guardiola had won 19 top-tier competitions, including the Champions League, the World Club Cup, La Liga, all the hits. But does that matter? And why hasn't De Zerbi won any trophies yet? Is it all style over substance? Well, De Zerbi has said in the past that he prefers to enjoy his work rather than winning trophies. But you would say that if you've only really managed in the lower leagues for most of your managerial career. And that's what he's done, which sort of makes sense because as a player, De Zerbi was a lower league kind of player. He came through AC Milan as a youth player, as a kind of creative number 10, playing the risky passes, but he only made 3 senior appearances in Serie A over his whole career. A bit of a journeyman. Look at all the clubs he's played for. There are quite a few. This is a picture of him playing for CFR Cluj in Romania. Look at him here. This is him here. His last team was Trento, which is a lower league Italian team in Serie D, and he retired and then went into coaching straight away in Serie D. That was the level he started at. Now, as a manager, De Zerbi is heavily influenced by Pep Guardiola. He says his football is the best, and he studied lots of his training sessions at Barcelona and Bayern Munich before taking a job at Foggia. But there, one of his players questions his tactical instructions and may have changed De Zerbi's career, perhaps the world of football, forever. And I'll tell you more about him soon to keep you on the video. But whatever that mysterious person did, I'll tell you soon, it worked, because De Zerbi ended up at Palermo in Serie A. That's really good, a Serie A side, very early in his career. Then he was sacked shortly after he lost 7 games in a row, took no points at home and got knocked out of the cup by a lower league team. This is bad. And then, so the story goes, De Zerbi got in touch with Marcelo Bielsa, and he and his staff went to go and study how Bielsa coaches people. And this was his real training. This is how he became what he is today. And so, having closely studied all the elite managers and how they train, particularly people like Guardiola and Marcelo Bielsa, De Zerbi ends up at Sassuolo and is super intense in training. And this is the first thing that Roberto De Zerbi actually does. And lots of managers do this, but according to some of his ex-players, like Kevin Prince Boateng, who was recently on Rio Ferdinand's podcast, his attention to detail is absolutely key, and he is super hands-on on everything, adjusting your body position. Body shape is hugely important, how you receive the ball, what message you're sending the opposition and your teammate. Here's an example here of Billy Gilmore playing against Newcastle, right? So if you look at his body shape, he is positioned to pass the ball to these lads here. This is the body shape for this pass. And the Newcastle players all think that the ball is going to go to this side, so when it comes into Mitoma, they have to turn round. Now the next trick is that Mitoma fakes how he's going to receive the ball. He fakes his body positioning, so when the ball comes to him, it looks like he's going to face directly at the opponent. So you see him here. Here's him receiving the ball. He's facing this way. So Newcastle players start to curve their runs round in front of him to try and get close to the ball, because they think the ball is going to go either back to one of these players here. That's the way he's facing. But this is the trick, and he turns inside on his right foot and takes it into this space, which is then created by that one trick. And these are the kinds of really specific, detailed hands-on coaching things that De Zerbi is telling his players. How to win a tiny bit of space, how to deceive opponents when they receive the ball so they can keep the ball moving forward. Now some players are just good, so they do that anyway. Maybe you do that. But lots of De Zerbi's players also do it. The centre-backs do this fake to receive thing to try and deceive where the ball's going to come from and where it's going to go. Where did you come from? Cotton Eye Joe. Another thing is that lots of old De Zerbi players, so his ex-players like Kevin Prince Boateng, have said that he is on to them all of the time. Like if you are even just slightly out of position by 1 or 2 meters, it might mean that this pass won't go to the next pass, won't go to the next pass. So everything's knock-on effect, and he goes nuts. He goes so nuts, in fact, that Boateng says, this guy, he takes off his pants, rips off his shirt, he tackles you. This is the kind of intensity level we're talking about as a coach. And Adam Lallana, a player who's played under Jurgen Klopp, lots of intense coaches, he says that De Zerbi is the most hands-on coach he's ever worked with on the training pitch. And the reason for that is because he's always in the centre orchestrating, he's becoming the playmaker, like he's acting as the centre half, he's acting as the goalkeeper sometimes, showing us the finer details of what he wants. So De Zerbi gets the finer details hammered into his players by constantly coaching them hands-on on the training pitch every single day. So everything you see on the pitch is orchestrated entirely from really minute detail and instructions by De Zerbi on the training ground. But those are the finer details, specific things. What about the wider tactical outlook? Well, we know that De Zerbi throughout all his clubs has liked to play a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1. It looks like this. But it also looks like a 4-2-4 at times. What he definitely likes is to have at least one ball-playing centre-back to play the ball out from the back, obviously, but both can do it. He's made Adam Webster be able to play out from the back here as well. He has a right-back, which is often a midfielder. Moises Caicedo did this a lot when he was there. He played at right-back, and you have Pascal Gross done it this season as well. And they can do this because often the fullbacks come inside the pitch, and they can do that because they usually play wingers. So quite a Guardiola thing, having wingers wide to stretch the pitch. We talked about this quite a lot. But his principles are they build from the back and they keep possession. De Zerbi's teams always have possession. It's the Sassuolo team in Serie A. One of the years that they finished 8th, they were second for possession in Serie A, behind only the title-winning Inter Milan, managed by Antonio Conte. And for context, this is a little bit like getting Crystal Palace to have 60% of possession every single week, because the Sassuolo are a lower mid-table team. That's what they are. And as we all now know, because I told you earlier, Brighton also keep the ball a lot. They have the second most possession of anyone in the Premier League since De Zerbi joined, remember. But it's what you do with the possession that counts. This is the important thing, because if you're forever passing slowly, like if you get the ball to the wing, then the winger dribbles a little bit, gets near a defender, and then doesn't fancy it, passes back, and you start passing around the back forever, well, there's absolutely no point. You're never going to get any shots away. But since De Zerbi's been at Brighton, they have had the most shots of any team in the Premier League. So this is interesting because they have had all the possession and they're also creating lots and lots of shots more than anyone else. So how is he doing this? Well, the typical thing to kind of do against a team who sits deep in a block, maybe like this, is to move the ball around quickly. The theory being that if you can move it quickly, you can disrupt the lines of the opponent, so you're moving out wide. Naturally, they're all going to move out with the block to one side. And the hope is that doing this over a period of time, eventually they'll stop doing it quite so well, and you might get a little line appears, a little gap that you can thread the ball through, and that's where you gain some sort of benefit from. That's the theory. But generally, the most difficult time to score is when your opponent is in their solid defensive shape like this, and the most dangerous time to have the ball is near your own goal. But De Zerbi's tactics are designed to manipulate both of these scenarios. And this is where our friend, the mysterious man who may have influenced all of world football, comes back into play. Well, this guy's name is Antonio Vacca, and he used to play for Foggia, which is where De Zerbi was managing. I told you this earlier. But anyway, he told The Athletic all about this practice match they were doing in training at Foggia, and he said, "My teammates on the opposing side weren't stepping out to press me, so the mister," he means De Zerbi, "kept telling me pass it, move it," like we're saying, trying to move the ball quickly to open up the team. But then Vacca said, "Mister, if our opponents on Sunday come here and play for a point and I move it without getting one of them to jump and press the ball, it's no use. If I put the sole of my foot on the ball and lured my opponent out, I've invited him to press me. As he does that, we can break the line with a pass." Now this completely changed De Zerbi's take on how to open up teams, and they do this a lot of the time by resting their studs on the ball. So in this sort of situation, you might see Adam Webster or Lewis Dunk just stand completely still on the ball. Now it's sometimes referred to as baiting the press, something like that. I'm sure you've heard of it by now because everyone has started doing it. Because the theory being, if all this team is in the block, this defensive team is in the block, that's very hard to open up. So you move it, pass it around, there's a good chance you might end up losing the ball. So what you want really is to force this team to be in a transitional shape rather than their solid shape. So once this player, and it will always happen, will eventually engage to this player, he then opens up this passing lane, because you see Dunk might want to pass it straight in to Gross here, but he can't obviously as this guy's in the way. But as soon as he runs, you'll have to show him one way, either that way, which will show the ball this way, or you'll show his run this way, which will then open up this pass into Gross, something like that. This is what they want to do. They want teams to try and press them so they can play through them. So they want to get the ball through the middle of the pitch because that is where all the fun is. Now let's use Gross as the example in this sort of position here. So we know that if this player leaves his little path here and goes straight to Dunk, what will happen is that he'll leave this passing lane open. But obviously he won't do that. He'll make sure he runs in a way that he can't pass it through. But what De Zerbi has is lots of patterns and combinations depending on where the pressure comes from so they can play out. But what they do a lot of is have third man combinations. So it works with this double pivot in here, the Gilmore-Gross double pivot, but Gross is the player we're going to use as an example. Because if Dunk is here and puts on the pressure, he can simply fire, rather than going straight through, he can simply fire a ball that goes here to Stupinan, this player will come round, this player will close him down, he can fire up between players, and it's created a little bit more space in this situation. This player might be close to him, but when the ball goes here, he'll move over here. Gross can move into space to receive the ball. So that's kind of one example of 3 men combining to get 1 pass done. But another version of this that you might see is that when Dunk has the ball and this player pushes him, rather than playing that obvious one into Gross here, because lots of players will make this combination, the triangle anyway, the ball will go to Estupiñán, Welbeck will drop at the last second, timing's absolutely vital, he'll fire into Welbeck and that'll be a layoff pass to Gross. And this has a really cool knock-on effect, because if you see what happens, right, if this player here goes out to Dunk, he goes out here, they then swap over, the press changes, they start to move around trying to block it in. This player will block the pass into Gross, it's the obvious pass. This guy's here, if he drops, does the centre-back go with him and leave space in behind? So if he does there, Estupiñán in theory could fire it through. Lots of things can happen as knock-on effects. Some of the time the centre-back will go with him and get tight, but it doesn't really matter, because if he's quick and gets in quick, this ball comes to Welbeck, then of course this player is going over here, then going over here, then suddenly he's over here. So they're looking back, forward, it's really confusing, and that's how you get players in more space. It's suddenly Gross is in the central position right here, where he can then ping the ball through to someone like Mitoma coming off the wing, or through to Ferguson, something like that. Lots and lots of choices for them to make, and it's all to do with these 3rd-man combination runs to pull teams apart. And those are just kind of 2 basic patterns. There's loads and loads of patterns depending on where the pressure comes from, as we say. Maybe the player comes here, Dunk might have this option, he might also go back to the goalkeeper, they pull out even wider to pull these guys in to make it different. The fullbacks might come inside, these guys might push up. There's loads of different patterns that have knock-on effects to each player. This is what De Zerbi is drilling into them in the training grounds. They have a playbook to essentially go through whenever the pressure comes, which they invite. And another thing that De Zerbi actually does is question what all the rules are in the positional play, because Johan Cruyff and, well, Rinus Michels, but Johan Cruyff really are the architects of this Guardiola system, which has usually had one single number 6. And then the theory is, if you have one number 6 here, one pivot player, what you can do is spread your centre-backs out, then you've got one player in here and you can push more players forward. So you have a 3 in here, maybe one striker, and you can pin the fullbacks with your wingers like this. Then you've got more passing angles. In theory, you've got all these lovely triangles and pyramids and diamonds and whatever you want all over the pitch. That's what you want to have. But rather than get players further up the pitch to offer these angles, De Zerbi bunches them in here, so you get more players in your own half. You might get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players all here with the wingers wide, because then you've got questions to make of the centre-backs. Do they go tight to these players and leave these runs in behind, which Brighton players are looking to make? Now, of course, lots of analysts and managers have figured this out. Everyone knows how Brighton play now. Even I've noticed. And so what they've had to do is make in-game adjustments to be able to play against people who've worked out how to press them. Now, what teams tend to do against them now is play in a 4-4-2 block like this. They don't engage as early as they want them to, because the teams you'll notice Brighton have done badly against are teams like West Ham who sit off them, and then teams they play well against are ones who press. So even good teams like Liverpool, who want to try and press them, will stay in this sort of shape. So what Liverpool did was put one midfielder through the middle of these 2 pivots here. So you had 2 forwards in this shape, one side a little bit deeper, and the idea is that whichever side the ball goes, if it goes to this left side here, this guy can get tight here, this guy can go and cover, or this guy jumps out. There's lots of different pressing shapes you can get, but basically they're trying to block the ball going through the middle. And Man United played a diamond against them, partly because of, I think, personnel, but I think because they've worked out this is a good way to disrupt Brighton's passing shape. And so that diamond looks a little bit something like this, maybe one player deeper, pretty much the same as what Liverpool had, right? So you had this sort of shape here. And this setup of Man United stopped them playing through the middle, so they had to start playing out wide. And after Brighton scored against them, it's a lovely goal. De Zerbi had words with his players and told these centre-backs specifically to get much, much wider in build-up, which of course then means that these 2 players don't know really what to do because they're too far to get close to one of these players to stop them. It means that these players can drop in the middle between them because they're going to have to try and stay together to form a block, but it creates space for a longer pass out of there. So that's one adjustment that they made against Man United. And then against Liverpool, they lined up in the 4-4-2 like we said, and Szoboszlai moved out in midfield to get between these 2 midfielders. So again, same sort of problem for Brighton in build-up. But what they did was have Pascal Gross just drop in here to form the 3, which pushes these guys wider, which then upsets the Liverpool shape. They stay nice and narrow and compact in the middle of the pitch. But all they were doing was playing wide to Estupiñán or wide to Veltman or whoever was playing at the time. I can't remember exactly who was on the pitch at the time. This is what they did. And then this was their player on the ball who could carry up the pitch. So they always have ways to get out because De Zerbi always adjusts things in games to get the win. So lots of tweaks in game, but De Zerbi also makes huge changes at half time, adjusting certain simple little things to get his team, to give his team an advantage. Because what you'll see if you look at when Brighton score their goals, well boy, if you look at the 46th to 60th minute, They score far more and concede far less just after half-time, which would imply to me that De Zerbi is making clever changes. Another thing he actually definitely does. And another thing he actually definitely also does is swap his goalkeeper. So he might play Verbruggen some weeks, he might play Steele some weeks. It depends on the opponent and the tactical demands, because one is better than the other at passing short, one is better at going long. I can't remember which is which, but they're both good at different things.
Jason Steele, who's really good at making these short passes under pressure.
I'm hearing now that Steele is better at passing short. Now, of course, all of this comes from the training ground. This is what we know De Zerbi does, is he hammers his players in training so they can do all these specific things, all these specific patterns, and this system is so ingrained in the players that you can drop players in and out of it. He changes the starting lineup constantly, and there's no real drop-off in performance, other than maybe against Aston Villa, where I would say the midfield was a bit weak because they had a young lad coming in next to Billy Gilmore and there was no power. Sometimes you need power in football. But basically every single player is full of confidence. All the players say that it makes them feel $1 million, and they have the confidence to play passes and play on the ball because they have 2 or 3 options every time they get the ball. Every single player knows there's going to be runs made inside to free up someone else for a run. It's all going to be third man combinations. So it's going to be something like this, into this guy, into this guy. Everything's going on all the time. All the players are aware of when, they know what the triggers are and how to perform them because of the work in the training ground. So when you hear people say things like, oh, it's all very well passing around the back and all, but sometimes you just got to hoof the ball away. You don't actually have to do that. Brighton have the 5th lowest clearances of any team in the league this season, and they play the 3rd fewest long passes as well. This shows you that they're playing lots of short passes, drawing the opponent out, inviting the pressure. They actively want it. They thrive in the pressure, and that's how they're getting all these shots, creating all these chances, and that's why they're so good. So the system works, and the players are all brilliant within it because they're all made better by De Zerbi, the coach. He is hands-on, and he hammers into them to be able to do the things he wants them to do. And that's how players get so much better. Like Sassuolo have players like Locatelli and Raspadori, who were not highly thought of, but went on to play for Juventus and the Italian national team. I can't remember where Raspadori went. Napoli, that's where he went. But they sold about 150 million euros worth of players, which is Sassuolo. It's pretty good. Brighton, as we just said earlier, sold 195 million pounds worth of players. A goalkeeper, 2 of their best players, and they're still exactly as good, even better maybe, than they were last season. So De Zerbi is improving players too, another thing he definitely does. Even Kevin Prince Boateng says he got better when he was about 32. He played for Barcelona after De Zerbi was his coach. So something went very well there. There is a reason that so many coaches absolutely love De Zerbi. There's a reason that Jurgen Klopp says he's one of the best coaches in the world, because that's what Roberto De Zerbi actually appears to do. He does all the things that are good in coaching, hands-on, make sure the system works, make sure he wins games, but he thinks differently. He goes against what everyone else is doing, and that's how come they're able to do so many cool things that are opening up games of football and making Brighton so entertaining to watch. And for more details, watch this video again.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.